right, welcome everyone. We are recording. Thank you so much for joining us today to learn all about the importance of vision and what you want out of your tour and travel business. With that, please do feel free to post all your questions in the chat or the Q&A. This is going to be hopefully an interactive and engaging conversation. So with that, I will hand it over to Stu Card with Cultivate Advisors.
Hey, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Hopefully you've got a quick summary, quick idea of what we're going to be doing today. But this is Flying in the Clouds, the importance of vision and what you want out of your tour and travel business. So I will do a quick intro to myself, and then we'll jump into the topic and what we hope to accomplish today. So again, this is who I am. I'm a business advisor with Cultivate Advisors, but also the co-founder of Savannah Taste Experience. A little bit about me and my background before diving into the world of food tours, which I run in Savannah Taste Experience. I was a trial attorney for several years, about 9 years, and did those ridiculous 80, 90-hour work weeks, which of course nobody wants. Did a business trip to Savannah, fell in love with the city, and there started my love for the tour business. I have been running a Savannah Taste Experience since 2012 with my brother, and still own that business. I still run that business, but I spend most of my professional time doing working for Cultivate Advisors and being in business advisors, working with small and medium-sized businesses, building their enterprise value and making sure that they have that scalable growth and that structure in place to make sure people really enjoy their businesses. Also sort of relevant to this topic too, I became a pilot in 2021. And I'll tell you why that's kind of important as we kind of roll through this here in the next couple of minutes. But being a pilot really has sort of helped shape the way I look at businesses moving forward since that standpoint. So business growth advisor for small business startups, that's with Cultivate. And some of the content and stuff that we have here today is straight from Cultivate, and feel free to ask us any questions at the end with regard to any of those things. Flying, I would love to chat with you about, but also Cultivate Advisors, or even running food tours. Okay, what today's webinar is all about, we'll start with why we're here. We'll go through the power of vision and exactly what it is. So we're all talking from the same vocabulary. We'll also start going through what it looks like to craft your own vision statement, your own vision organizer. And then we'll go into some real practicals, like taking that vision to action, what it actually, you can use your vision statement for and why it's so important, and actually using some real practical examples of how to use that. And I want to make sure that I save time for some Q&A to make sure we get as much of that interaction as possible. So I'm going to try to stick to my timeline as much as I possibly can. So there's a lot of content to go through, and I tend to talk fast, but I'll try to slow down when I can. So with that being said, let's start with why we're here. The real reason why vision is important is because we want to keep moving towards our goal, regardless of the climate. And that's obviously very important when you're flying a plane, but clearly the same thing applies when you are running a business, right? You have a destination in mind of where you're heading. And the climate in this particular instance refers to all those things that you are not in control of in a business, right? We're not just talking about clouds like are relevant to planes. We're talking about geopolitical scenarios. We're talking about, things like natural events. We're also talking about, growth events, some surprises and stuff that happen, making sure you're still heading in the direction you want to go to. So with that in mind, the way I came up with this idea was, again, as a pilot, I started realizing there's two fundamental questions that every pilot asks that most businesses either ask or should be asking of themselves. And I wanted to point out right at the very beginning that most business owners don't ask the second question, and that was the inspiration behind this webinar. So the first question, of course, is, there we go. Can I get this plane safely off of the ground? Now, from a business perspective, we think about that all the time, right? We think about that before you launch your business. I have a great product. I have a great, resource. I have some people behind me that can really help me get this off the ground. Um, I've got a long enough runway. I've either invested enough in it, or I know that I can start making money on this before financially um, I'm in a bad spot. For example, not paying myself for a period of time, etc. But the second question, which is probably more important than the first question that you need to ask before you take the plane off of the ground, is can I get this plane safely back on the ground if I get it off the ground? And that's the part where I feel like a lot of business owners haven't thought about. They haven't put down an exit strategy in place. And so when we're talking about exit strategy, we're not necessarily talking about like, when am I going to sell? But we need to be thinking about the things that are really important to us. What do you want out of this business? Is this going to be a legacy business? Are you going to hand it off to family members? Or is this going to be retirement? You're building this essentially as an asset rather than just a place where I work. And the reason why that's really important, you think about things like enterprise value, which I'll explain a little bit later and what I mean by that, is because there are several reasons why you might be forced to sell your business or are forced to make some drastic changes in your business. And that might require bringing on equity people or so on and so forth. And they're what we call the 5 Ds, right? Death, disability, divorce, disagreements, and distress. And these are essentially some of the clouds that we might encounter, some of the climate that we might encounter while we're running a business that if we're not prepared for, we don't have our vision in place, we can be in bad shape. So I want to talk about VFR versus IFR flight rules. So these are pilot terms, and they're really important for us to set this up at the outset so we understand the metaphors that we're dealing with. VFR just simply means visual flight rules. It means you're flying in good weather. There's no clouds in sight. You can see the ground. You can see miles and miles in every direction. So when you think about that from a business perspective, flying is actually really easy when it's sunny out. You can look out the windows. You really don't need your instruments as much as one would expect. But the problem really comes when you do start encountering IFR conditions. All right, and that means instrument flight rules conditions. And what instrument flight rules condition means is that you no longer looking out your window, you're looking down at your instruments. And flying strictly on your instruments requires a lot of training and a lot of discipline. And without that training and discipline, your flying in clouds is very disorienting. There's sections and sections and lots of training within the books that you would study to become a pilot, as well as actually in the cockpit itself. It is actually how JFK Jr. Crashed his plane. He had a plane very similar to mine, a small, 4-seater plane, 6-seater plane, and was flying in visual flight rules. And instead of turning around and going back, he decided to fly through the clouds, thought he could do it. He got disoriented. He thought he was climbing when he was actually leveling off straight, and he put his plane into a flat spin. And he couldn't figure out which way was up because he wasn't trained to look at his instruments. So what does this mean for a business perspective? What are the instruments? What are the training that we have to do and the discipline that we have to do in order to make sure that when we do encounter that turbulence, when we do encounter that difficult weather, where we couldn't get disoriented, we're no longer going to be staring out at the beautiful horizon in the sky in front of us. We're going to be staring down at our instruments. What instruments are we referring to? Well, of course, the big one is we're going to be referring to our vision. Anytime we run into some difficulty, whether it be COVID, whether it be travel bans or something like that, that's totally disrupting what you were expecting to do with your business that year, it can be disorienting. What am I supposed to do now? Where am I supposed to go for help? What are the resources that are available to me? Let's go back to your vision. What is fundamental to you? Where are you trying to go with your business? Start there. And I'll show you exactly how to use that as we go through this seminar. The other one that we're not really going to cover during this in this seminar, but it's the second set of instruments that you really have to pay attention to, which is your financial fundamentals. Make sure as part of your discipline, you are not just keeping up with your vision statement and organizer and making sure you're constantly heading in the direction you want to, but that you understand your financials. I know that sounds very basic, but I can tell you from the work that I do that many, many, many business owners don't understand their financial fundamentals. So spend time on your monthly P&Ls, your balance sheet every month, and then most importantly, your cash flow statement and tracker, knowing exactly what your current and future cash positions are, is so, so important as part of your instruments. So if you understand these instruments, and when you hit these turbulent times, focus on these, and it'll help out tremendously in you making decisions on where you want to go. Okay. We're going to do a quick survey. If you guys can just jump into the chat and let me know how many of you have actually written either a 10-year or a 5-year personal and business vision statement. I'd be curious to see.
Feel free to put your responses in the chat.
Just like, yes, you have, or no, never done it before. So we got a couple people. Okay. Okay.
A couple who have not, a couple that have. Yep.
Yeah. Great. So for those that have and those that have not, we're going to go through this from a couple different perspectives. So you'll see there's some great books that I'm going to recommend at the end. So a lot of this stuff is going to be pulled from a book called Traction, another from a book called Vivid Vision, and others are basically from all the data and that we have from working with hundreds, if not thousands at this point, businesses with Cultivate Advisors. So we've got a lot of this stuff sort of aggregated and put into place here. So whether you have or you have not, so it looks like it's about 50, no, looks like most of you have not, but a handful of you have. Hopefully this will help clear up and maybe even strengthen the vision, the visions that you already have in place. Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Power of vision. So let's work through what the power of vision is. And again, this is more or less in the defining what vision is section of our seminar. Okay, so we're going to talk through what is vision, why vision matters specifically in tour and travel, and the general benefits of a clear vision. All right, and so what are we talking about then when we say vision? We want to be clear as to what we're defining here. This is your why, right? This is where you're heading to, why your business is important to you, what your long-term goals and aspirations are for your business, but it is not your mission statement. All right, your mission statement is really about who you are now, and your vision statement is more or less like who you're working to become and who you would define yourself as in the future, like your aspirational you. And specifically, though, when we talk about vision, what we really want are these things. We want to make sure that you've defined your core values, right? I'll describe what those are in a minute. We want to describe your passion, your distinctive voice, like your uniqueness. And then we want to have your 10-year vision and the 3 to 5 year picture. Now, some of you, like as we go through this, you'll see with some of the worksheets, we need to think about what length of time makes sense for your vision. For example, if you are looking to retire and exit within 5 years, well, then perhaps a 10-year vision is not as important. But from most people's perspective, especially if you're starting up your business, you're young in your business, let's think about what your 10-year vision looks like. All right, now why is vision important in the tour and travel sector specifically? And we just touched on a few of these already. But let's think about those geopolitical and natural events that happen. For those of you who survived COVID, you'll know this, how important this really was to you. And I guarantee, well, I shouldn't say guarantee, but I bet that a bunch of you that handled COVID well you relied heavily on your vision, you relied heavily on those financials, specifically with your cash flow, to help you navigate through those difficult times. The other thing that's really important in this sector as well, let me go back, was wrong way. Go backwards. Is recruiting and retention. So with recruiting and retention, we, hey Deb, how are you?
Sorry, guys. Hi,
That's all
cyber
right.
community.
Yeah. So with recruiting and retention, we know that in the tour and travel world, this can be difficult. You're looking for high quality people, and we hear time and time again with a lot of tour and travel businesses that keeping people, high retention is really important. Well, statistics have shown, a lot of business have shown that a good vision that is shared, especially when you have those core values in place, will really help with recruiting and retention. It really gets people on board and it keeps them around longer. And I'll show you exactly how here as we go through these slides. So the benefits of clear vision beyond just those that directly impact us as tour travel businesses. The benefit of clear vision is going to be your improved decision making. Of course, you're going to have that enhanced team alignment and motivation, because having good vision is one thing, but if you don't share it, obviously it won't have the same impact. So when you share your vision, when you share who your core value, what your core values are with your team, you get people aligned, you get your team aligned, you get them motivated to do their jobs, to do what you're asking of them. And like I said, it adds to better recruiting and higher retention. And that's because when you are hiring, when you're doing that recruiting, you are going to be looking for people that align with your core values. You're going to share with them where you are going with your business. And either you're going to get some excitement from people during that interview process, and you're going to want to bring them on board because they align with that vision right away, or they don't, in which case you know that that is going to be a higher climb to get them to align. So maybe you don't hire that person. Better and more effective marketing. When you know who you are and where you are going, that is going to be displayed in everything from your website to any pamphlet you might hand out to any conversation you might have that's in the sales process. So a strong, clear vision will help with your marketing and your sales as well. And then, of course, the main thing we're talking about here overall is the increased resilience in the face of challenging times, right? So whether we're talking about COVID, whether we're talking about travel bans that are coming up, geopolitical things that are totally outside of your control, or natural events that happen, making sure you have a clear vision will help you make those decisions and direct you on the best course of action. All right. So the next section we're going to be talking about here is crafting your vision. The two main things we're going to be focusing on here is the self-reflection and discovery phase. Some of this can be a little painful for some of you, I know, because you're going to have to deal with potentially some either skeletons in the closets or some scary things about your business. But you need to be honest with yourself as you're going through this to define who you really are at this moment, as well as where you want to go and what you want to do with your business. And so the second part is, after that self-reflection and discovery phase, is taking those elements and building that vision statement. And we'll show you exactly what that looks like here. So some of the things that we have at Catapult, or excuse me, at Cultivate, that we use at our Catapult event, is we've got these vision assessments. So these are going to be available to you at the end of this conference. We're going to have some worksheets for you to work out. And they're going to basically walk through your own personal assessment as well as your professional assessment. Who you are professionally and who you are personally, and making sure you're very comfortable with those things. This is going to help you define really where you want to go and what you want to do. Because when we talk about vision, we're not just talking about saying, oh, I want to make $10 million in revenue, over the next couple of years. What we're referring to is like, what do you really want out of this business? Do you want to be working 60 hours a week and traveling around the world? For some people, that would be a dream. And for others, it's like, I would rather have a 15-hour-a-week type thing where I'm engaged with this business on this sort of strategic level. And the revenue is not that important so long as I can cover my salary, what I expect for my salary. Those are really important because those drivers are very, very different. So making sure you're taking the time to personally reflect as well as professionally reflect. All right, the next one that you're going to have, the next worksheet that you're going to have to work through is 3 steps to creating your ultimate vision. Again, these are going to be more on those personal questions again. What do you love? What do you value the most? These are things that you really need to be honest with yourself about. Again, like I said, if it's friends and family, if it's spending time with them, designing a business around having them involved to some degree might be important to you. And others, it might be the very opposite. Like, while friends and family are important, I don't want to mix family and friends with business. So having these questions, digging into this self-reflection phase is really going to help you with this next step, which is crafting the vision statement. So once you have those things in place, what we really want to start with is your BHAG. Oops, and I kind of jumped ahead a little bit. So with BHAG, what are we referring to here? What does that actually mean? If you've never heard this phrase before, you can see it in books like Vivid Vision. We use it all the time in Cultivate as well. We're talking about a big, hairy, audacious goal. So why is that important? Why do we start there? It's because we're talking about aspiration, where you want to go. If you hold yourself accountable to a goal that is only a few feet in front of you and you stop there, you never know about how far you could have gone. Take, for example, a marathon runner. You're striving for a really high goal, 26.3 miles, right? Like, it is a long way to run in one day. So if you had set your goal for only 5K, and you could have done 26.3, there's a big difference, right? So we're talking about a long enough vision down the road. We're talking about 10 years down the road, or maybe it's 5 years down the road for you if you're looking to retire or something like that. But we're not talking about next week's goal. We're talking about a long way down the road. So make sure you are setting yourself a big, hairy, audacious goal. Set a BHAG, something for you to work towards. And then we'll show you basically how we break that down and start putting into place some real actionable items for you to achieve those things. The next thing we have to do when we're putting together the structure of a vision statement is we want to identify your core values and your passion, right? So the core values, what we're looking for is we're going to keep this simple. Like, we're going to use words or short phrases that are great adjectives to describe who you are as a company. Take the time to bounce these off of your leadership, bounce them off of the people that have worked with you, and really, like, get down to the core of who you are. If you use an adjective that doesn't really describe you, and doesn't describe who you want to be, then you're going to start creating the thing, right? So if you say, for example, you are creative, but you're not really there, and that's not really who you aspire to be creative. If you start putting the words creative into all of your marketing, into all of the things that you're doing, then you will become creative. So if that's something you want, great. If that's not something you want to keep it very simple and straightforward, and you want to have a systems in place where we're not really challenging into new territory all the time, then don't use that as an adjective. And then you want to put in there what you're passionate about. So start thinking about, like, why is it that I got into this business? Remember at the beginning of this, we talked about what vision was. Vision really is the why, right? So start thinking about why you're passionate about your business and what makes you unique and different. What makes you stand out? What was the reason you got into this in the first place? And why do you keep striving to be better? Why do you keep wanting to be the best tour company that you could be? These are things that you need to really articulate. Sometimes it can be difficult to put these things down on paper, but once you do, it looks like this. This is mostly taken from sort of a version of from the Traction book, but I really like this vision statement set out like this. This vision organizer really helps. You're going to use this in a number of different ways, which I'll describe here in a moment. So here's an example of a tour company and their vision statement. They have their core values is quality, creative, fun, and professional. So why those are important? Well, when they start hiring people, they're going to ask questions about quality. They're going to ask questions about creativity. They're going to ask questions that are going to try to pull the fun out of that person during the interview process, and also as well as making sure that person is professional. Once you realize that the person you're hiring has all of these qualities, these core values, you know they're going to align with your business and are more likely to not only stay and be a great resource, but they're going to be a driver of those core values for the rest of your team, right? So they're going to bring that culture up. The other thing is the core focus. Those are the things we just talked about, the passion, the niche, describing those things. So in this particular case, their passion is really for showing off the food, beverage, and culture of Middle Tennessee. Those things, it's narrow enough, it's focused enough on the areas that they're interested in. And their niche is really more aligned with the whiskey of Middle Tennessee and being aficionados in that area. So with that in mind, now they know like who they are as a person, or who they are as a business, I should say. And then they've got this really big BHAG goal, 15 million in enterprise value. Describe and define enterprise value here in just a moment. But just think about a valuation standpoint, 15 million. But specifically, they've added in these other things. And this is where it's really, really important for you to dive into who you want to be. Is this a business that you're looking to sell off? Is this a business you want to hand down to, a family member? Or is this, going to be an asset? Is this something you really want to retire into, where maybe owners working less than 10 hours a week is not what you want? You actually want to stay in this business. You want to have a sustainable business because you want to work in this business through your retirement, maybe at 20 hours a week or 30 hours a week or something like that. These targets are really important for you as you start defining your strategy, your roadmap in getting there. Okay, so making sure these are clear and that you actually agree with these things. And then on the right-hand side, you're going to see that 3-year picture. Give yourself a specific date here, right? So by December 31st, 2027, if we have a 10-year goal on the left-hand side at $15 million enterprise value, this person had set a target for them for $5 million in revenue for the year of 2027. And so we go even more specific with that. Well, what would need to happen in order for that 5 million to look like that? Well, they're going to need to have this river product as well as this distillery product, and they need to be cross-selling to each other so that they are not only growing on either side, but they can also add those sales to each other. They realize that they're going to have an events location in order to host all of this, as well as provide these additional opportunities, as well as they're going to need a boat dock for the river property and have potentially these whiskey festivals. And that's how they're going to get, as a broad picture, that $5 million in revenue. And that final little pocket there on the left-hand side that makes up a huge chunk is that marketing strategy. Don't skip this part. Spend the time to basically dissolve those core values and core focus into what you're going to do with them from a marketing standpoint. So defining your target market. In this case, this person has 2 products with potentially different target markets. And so they've broken their uniqueness and their target markets into those 2 different areas. So if that relates to you, feel free to break this down into the different areas that really matter the most to you. But putting down the specific type of person, the demographic of the person that you're going to aim for. Because this would be really helpful. So you're going to use this again, not just for your recruiting and retention, but for your marketing now. So when I say marketing, I mean everything, like I said, from your website to your ads to any sort of sales pipeline that you're doing. You need to make sure that your website reflects your core values at the top, that you're quality, creative, fun, professional. You need to make sure that your marketing pitches, your top of sales funnel stuff, not only has those things, but talks about those core focus, and that will help really hone in on the type of people that you're looking for and who might be responsive to your products. Okay, so how do we take vision to action? We just kind of talked about a little bit about how that will work, but let's get a little bit more specific on goal setting, understanding enterprise value, those high-level strategies for increasing those enterprise value, and then strategy development. Okay, so goal setting, the first and foremost, when we set goals, they need to be smart. So we're out of the BHAG mindset now, right? We've already set our BHAG, and that's our vision. Now, our goals for achieving the next step in that. So let's think a year now goal. It needs to be specific, and we need to make sure it's measurable, right? We're going to keep track of everything. The most important thing we can do when we're setting goals is making sure that there's a way for us to hold ourselves accountable. So we're going to come up with numbers that make sense, that you can track, that every month, every quarter, whatever makes most sense, you can keep yourself moving towards that goal. They need to be achievable as well, right? This is not the sort of BHAG should still be achievable. Hopefully we can still achieve that on a longer time scale. But these smaller chunks, we really need to make sure that we're achieving them. There's nothing more motivating than setting yourself an achievable but tough goal, but reaching it. You reach that goal, it's like, holy crap, we actually did it. Like, give ourselves a pat on the back. Let's go set another big goal and go for it. It needs to be relevant. And specifically, when we talk about relevant, let's think about it relating to your vision, right? So these goals, it doesn't make any sense for us to drive towards a $5 million a year revenue goal if it has nothing to do with our vision, which has more to do with structural changes and wanting to work less than 70 hours a week in our business or something. And it needs to be time bound. Don't have a limitless time on your goal. Like, set a date, put it on your calendar. This is the date that I am going to achieve this goal, right? Going back to that relevant thing, I can't stress this enough, making sure your goals align with your vision. There's no sense, there's no point in doing a vision statement if you're not going to set your strategy and your goals towards that vision. And just remember that these goals can be adjusted and changed whenever the circumstances arise. That's why the vision is really important. When you have it set up before those geopolitical things happen, before those natural disasters happen, before any sort of turbulence that is outside of your control happens that affects your business, right? We want to make sure we have that vision aligned, so that if we do have to go back and reset new goals because the landscape changed, we know how to do that. We're going to go back to our vision. We're going to set smart goals to get us through this next section. All right. And then we're going to keep the concept of enterprise value in mind. It's always got to be front of mind. What do we mean by enterprise value, and why is that so important? When we're talking about enterprise value, we're not just talking about a valuation. We're talking about the health of your business too. Okay. So the definition, there's a lot of like math in here, it looks like, but I promise you it's a lot simpler than perhaps it looks at the screen. So enterprise value, it's really a measure of your company's total value. We're not just talking about a comprehensive, or we are, the equity market capitalization sort of structure can be very confusing. And also it might not capture who you are as a business. So oftentimes we think about these multiples for these industries, right? There's industry multipliers. These industry multipliers come from a series of businesses that have sold, and they range from, 1 times multiple to several times multiple. It can be in the 20s even. Very few businesses are there. The hospitality and tourism multiple, and those are things that you use when you're doing potentially like an equity market capitalization. So the multiple there is based on tourism. The average on profit is 3.94, but this ranges from about 1 to about 7 on the high end. But the average is 3.94. And if you think about the enterprise value as being the estimated value of your business times the business health, and we'll talk about that in a second, it gives you a much clearer picture of what your real value is as a business. So when we think about the business health, what we're talking about is the key areas of business that help the business scale. And I just put a little asterisk down there. I wanted to remind everybody that if you haven't worked with Cultivate in the past, we do have a free health and value assessment that you can do with Cultivate Advisors. It's a quick little 20-minute survey that goes through basically those key questions that are going to help define define your business health and say financials or sales or marketing and that kind of thing.
Stu, can
Okay.
I
Yep.
just wanted to speak to that. Can you guys hear me okay? Um, speak to that for the group. And so there'll be some time at the end of the presentation that has my calendar link. And really what I would recommend is that we'll start with a call with me, and then we'll make sure that you have access to the tools and resources. But it's definitely an eye-opening exercise for sure. Hopefully it only takes you 15 minutes, I like to think, Stu. But, depends how quick our fingers are working. We'll see.
That's
See.
it.
Anyway, there you go.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's nice to have a quick conversation before you jump into those things. That resources is really great. And as Deb said, it is very eye-opening, showing your health of your business in different areas and the kinds of things you need to work on. So when we think about your enterprise value, let's set a goal of an enterprise value of 1.5. And this is just an example of how this works and why it's so important. So our current profit for, let's just say 2024, we had a current profit of 450,000. We know our average tour profit multiplier is going to be 3.94. Remember, this is based on the data. These are going to be coming from, the industry. And just know that that's what the average is. It doesn't necessarily mean your business is going to sell at that. It's just that's what the average is. And it's a great place to start to use this sort of as a scoreboard, like where you're heading and where you're at. Right. And so we've assessed your business health at 65%. Again, that's going to come from doing something like the assessment that we just talked about with Cultivate. So what does that mean? In the end, that means your enterprise value, if we look at all of this, is about 1.15 million. So we're off by about $350,000. Now, why is that important? Because most people would look at this and say, well, I've got to increase my profit by $350,000 in order for me to hit my enterprise value, which means I probably have to increase my revenue. And so we're going to dump a bunch of money into a sales or marketing platform that potentially doesn't deliver as quickly as you want to. But instead, we take that same profit, we've got the same multiplier, but we improve the health of our business by focusing on things like leadership and recruiting and retention, those things that are actually more important to our particular business in this example than sales and marketing, which might be doing very well. So what happens then is that if I increase my business health by 85%, I didn't increase my revenue, I didn't increase my profit, but I improved the health of my business and I hit my enterprise value. So when we talk about setting goals, what's really important is we think about the enterprise value. So we're not constantly thinking about just driving more profit, just driving more revenue. We are thinking about the business health in general. So we can start setting goals that are more appropriate to what is in line with our vision and where we want to go. So high-level strategies for increasing value, which is the enterprise value, which is exactly what we were just talking about, is like we can focus on financial management. We can focus on operational efficiencies and reducing owner dependency. I'm going to pause on that one just for a second, because that is probably the biggest shocker for most people, is that owner dependency, right? That is where a lot of businesses get discounted during the valuation process. If you're going to sell your business, it might be, say, $5 million valuation, but they realize the owner is too critical to the business. And the business basically never sells, because what they really want is to buy you as a operator, and you are trying to get out of the business. So putting in operational efficiencies and reducing your dependency on the business will greatly improve your enterprise value. And of course, brand building is a big one too. Okay, strategy development. We're going to create a roadmap to achieve this vision. And then we're going, and so I'll talk to you a little bit in a second about planning a trip to DC, but that's what we're talking about. We have a vision, now we have some general goals of where we want to go. And now how do we get there? And then we're going to take those one-year roadmaps and break them down into quarterly sprints. So let's talk about the idea of this roadmap, right? So when you think about you're planning a trip to DC, right? If you're going to go to DC, how would you plan your trip? Just start thinking through that for a second. Well, I need to book a hotel room, and I either need to book a flight or determine whether or not I'm going to drive or take a train. So these are all the options to you. It's like, okay, well, let's book the hotel first. That's easiest for me, book a hotel. And now I need to get there. So I need to book a flight. Well, I've decided that I'm going to fly rather than drive. So I book a flight. Now I need to figure out how much I'm willing to pay. What's my budget? All these things. It's the same thing when you're designing your roadmap that is aligned with your vision to help you get to your vision, right? We've taken our 10-year down the road idea where we want to go. We've broken it down to a 3-year picture of what that looks like. Now we need to get to the 1 year. All right, let's set ourselves some goals that are smart, right? Those things we just talked about. And we're going to aim for those things. Now we understand where we're going for the year. We're going for the year, so we're going to hit $1 million in revenue. We're going to hit 40% net margins this year. That's what we're aiming for. Okay, well then how do we do that? Well, with $1 million in revenue and 40% margins, I would need to drastically clean up my costs. So where are the expenses? Now I need to set a roadmap for my expenses that need to be cleaned up. Where am I spending too much money on? If I need to increase my revenue because 1 million is 20% more than I did last year, well, then I need a sales and marketing strategy associated. All right, what do I need to do with my sales? And now you start getting more and more specific. And this is all based on the full year. But in order to make those actionable, let's break that down into quarterly sprints, going from macro to micro. And this will give you some great meeting models to have with your team as you start moving forward. We're going to work on this for the next quarter. Here are some targets we're going to hit. We're going to meet in 3 months from now, and we're going to go over it quarterly. This is what it looks like. I've broken this down. Again, this is a breakdown of something similar to what you might see in Traction, but a little bit more, I think, user-friendly. So we're taking down the 1-year plan. We've got our deadline on there, December 31st. We've accounted for what our revenue is. In this particular example, it's $3 million in revenue. We've got other goals for the year that are in there. You can see we've got the private tours and otters, dolphins, and whales. It's a quick nod to our friend Morgan at Cultivate. She comes up with these smaller clients or smaller deals that they're working on. Dolphins are medium-sized deals and whales are those big deals, right? Kind of a fun way of just breaking those ideas down. So we have those specific goals because we know those goals are going to help us get to that $3 million. And now we have our future date in the middle section for our quarterly sprint. We've broken that down as to what we need to achieve in this quarter, recognizing that there's seasonality, especially in the tour world here. So we're going to see that the seasonality for them for this Q1 is going to be a little bit less than a third, right? So they still have a really great goal to reach here. And they put some KPIs. Again, those measurables are really important. They've got the tour, they've got a Jack tour, they want 1,200 guests a month on that. They've got their TWA tour, they want 150 guests a month for that. And they want to be booking 50 otters on their private tour side. When you break that down into actual actionable items, they're going to have an SEO audit by January 31st. They're going to introduce this new tour. They're going to have this check-in on the 31st, a hire, no hire decision, so on and so forth. And they've broken it down between operations and marketing and then to those sales things that they're going to be working on. All right. So again, they're actionable, clear items in the next quarter. I actually just had this meeting with this client and they hit every single one of these except for one. And that was their whale booked. Other than that, they hit each one of these numbers because of this product, thinking it through this way. Okay, I actually did it right on time. We are ready for the Q&A part of this, where we can take a moment and slow down and answer those questions specifically to those things that matter most to you on what we just shared.
Awesome. Thank you, Stu, and I will help monitor the chat as well. So just all questions are fair. But yeah, so I would say any questions that you may have on the information. I'm curious too, out because it's tough. I mean, normally we like to be in a room together. We can see you, we're interacting. But out of what you've listened today, is there something that one thing you're willing to take away and try something different? Why don't we start there? See if you're actually out there.
And feel free to raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can openly ask your question or say your comment or put them in the chat or the Q&A.
Yes. And I'm curious, Stu, because you talk to so many different business owners and their BHAG, what's been like a BHAG that stood out to you of what you've heard so far with your clients and whatnot? Anything?
Yeah, there was so we tend to see things like 10 million in 10 to 15 million as like a BHAG for a buyout. This one BHAG was basically reducing their time down to 5 hours of operational time a week. That's all they
Oh, wow.
wanted.
Mhm.
And why that was important is because they were working 80 hours a week and they
Mm.
were driving themselves crazy. They weren't enjoying their business anymore. And so their BHAG wasn't tied to this huge revenue number. It was they wanted to enjoy their business again, was really it. So when
Mm.
you see something like that, you realize like, yeah, your business tends to take over when you don't have a strong vision. It tends to take over and become its own thing. And you really
Mhm.
need somebody to like stop, realign, and basically what's important. I need to build structure. I need to build leadership under me. I need to make
Mhm.
sure that I can unload some of these operational duties that are taking up all this time and my joy away from the business.
Yeah.
All
Do we
right,
have
looks
anything
like we
anything in the
got
chat
one
there?
here.
Yeah,
I
there's
see one.
Yeah.
When you apply the multiple to profit, is the bottom line profit after COGS and all operating expenses are deducted? Yes. Yes, that's a great question. And yes, the answer is yes. It should be your net. It's not your gross profit. It's your net income. It's really important. There are also multiples related to revenues that you'll see in valuations. But very few businesses will sell on multiples based on valuations. And I say I've never heard of that happening in the tour and travel world. So it is the multiple based on your profit, and it is going to be your net. Yeah, it's a great question.
Mm. Awesome. Hey, Stu, why don't we put up the next slide just because it has the QR code so they can get on that. And I'm sure Katie, because there were some resources you had, Stu, so we can share that in a follow-up to everybody after with the recording
yes,
for those that
absolutely.
weren't able to make it. Yeah. And then this is the QR code to my calendar. And then I'm going to put in the chat too, Jaw, who is also very helpful in getting people onto my calendar if for some reason, because I have a lot of travel coming up, but would love just to get on a quick call, as quick as 15 minutes even, for us just to connect and for me to get an understanding of where you are in the business. And then we can definitely give you access to a health and value assessment. I'll walk that through with you a little bit. And then Stu also has blocked off some time on his calendar to do some free advising sessions with you all. That's part of our give back to the CITA community. Many of you have taken us up on this, and some of you are working with us. Some of you went through the experience, still got a growth roadmap, and was able to start applying some of the things that we were able to work with you on during that session. But we have been part of CITA. Katie, how long has it been now? It's been a while, right?
It's been a few years. Yeah, 3,
Yeah, we're like
maybe
we're
3 or
almost in
4.
the
Yeah.
true marriage zone. We're past honeymoon, and we're in the thick of it. So love the community. Looking forward to seeing a lot of you in August when we're with you in Savannah. Glad to have Stu on board. He is another person to give you perspective because of his background in travel, in addition to Andrea, who's amazing, as you all know. So anything else? Any announcements you want to make, Katie?
No, this was fantastic. Thank you, Stu. Thank you, Deb, for helping organize this. I love the analogies to flying. I'm obsessed with flying and wanting to become a pilot myself. So I love all the analogies, and it really helps everything make sense. I will be sending out the recording. So Stu, Deb, if you guys have any resources, please email them to me and I'll include them in my follow-up email.
Okay.
And this was a wonderful session. So thank you very much.
Oh, wait, and
Great.
let me put in Jaw's email in case you guys have a problem. Hold on. It's jaw@cultivate advisors.com. And listen, the other thing I'll also say is with Q1, which I can't even believe that, guys, is in the books
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Like, how are you doing right now? Part of what we can do for you is this would be a quarterly overview. Let's like review your last quarter and how are things comparing from last quarter last year to this year, and take that pause and be able to reflect on that. So,
Yeah. I think with the resources too, it'll be really helpful to start some of those discussions too. So like the resources we'll provide you are some of those, like we showed you, the worksheets for personal and professional advisors, the 3, top ultimate things to put together an ultimate vision. And then I'll just share with you also those organizers, those examples that you can then, basically cut and paste and add those to your list of things you could be working on too. So.
Okay, and I just realized, of course, I did a typo, so there's jaw the right way. Well, cool. We gave some time back in everyone's time. So on their calendar. Thanks, Stu.
Amazing. Thank you, Stu. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and have a great rest of your week.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.